It's not that hard, folks.
Dave Weiss is a prominent flat earther. He has a YouTube channel and a website. He's also a fraud. Recently, a bunch of guys went down to Antarctica to view the 24-hour sun. There were people who know the world is a sphere, and I think there were 4 flat earthers. They observed the 24-hour sun, and Dave Weiss denies that the 24-hour sun was there. In fact, he has his own particular way it was done, how the guys were convinced. Here he is with Marty Field on Marty Field's channel, explaining the wonderment of the how the fraud was carried out. It's a load of nonsense.
Beyond that, but you're going to explain how you think that they actually fake the sun.
So we're talking to somebody that's been involved with this type of technology from years and years ago, and it's way more advanced. So if here's Union Glacier, their camp is somewhere in here. You could have one location here, and it beams the sun around this beam, and then when it gets over here, there's a handoff to another projector, and to do the handoff, there needs to be a little bit of an overlap so the sun doesn't blink out. And if they did an overlap, it could cause that squished sun, which they saw.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we're not even sure if there needs to be handoff. It depends on the location. They might be able to do the whole thing with one. But when I'm talking about the squished sun, we did see the sun morph and change shape a little bit. That could have been where the handoff happened.
Dave Mckeegan was part of the group went to Antarctica to conduct the so-called final experiment. The bunch of globe knowers and I think 4 flat earthers, as I said earlier. Dave Mckeegan recorded the 24-hour sun using his own camera system. Here he is explaining how it was done and why there is a bit of distortion in small parts of the video.
Now, bear in mind, this was shot with an Insta360, which has 2 180-degree fisheye lenses facing in opposite directions. So when the sun, or any object for that matter, circles all the way around the camera, at some point it has to move to the very edge of one of the fisheye lenses, then cross over the overlap between the lenses, and then it winds up at the very edge of the next lens. So it's naturally going to create distortion.
You can view Dave Mckeegan's video on his own YouTube channel. I'll post a link a little later to where the channel is. And he does a whole pile of stuff debunking the nonsense that is flat Earth.
Again, this needs more investigation, and I wish people would get off the ridiculous investigation path that they're on, that Jared and Austin are shills. They're pawns. They're not shills. They reported what they saw, but they're not looking into all of the possibilities. If they're transmitting into the sky, how far would they have to project? Well, if you had an airplane that was at 13,000 feet, how far would it have to go to appear to be 15 degrees off the horizon? And it's only 9.2 miles, right? So airplane 13,000 feet, height of the dome, okay? And it only have to go 9.2 miles to look like it's 15 degrees, and to be 30 degrees off the horizon, which would be the noon sun, only 4.27 miles. So think about this. The projector, it's got a radius of less than 10 miles, way less.
Yeah.
Now it could be, they could send it farther. They wouldn't have to send it farther if they're using the dome. So they're just making a ball go around those guys that has light and brings heat, right? Because they could feel the heat of the sun, and it was super bright.
This is the one thing that nobody's looking into, really. That you were the only one, as far as I knew, that was actually looking into it, and it's the one thing that they needed to fake.
The energy required to project an image of the sun, which would also reflect enough heat to bathe the very large area around the observers in the Antarctic, would be astronomical. It would be the continuous projection of many gigawatts of infrared and visible broad spectrum light energy. That would require an equivalent power source, a projector that could handle the power and the cabling, which I would think simply doesn't exist. It might be that flirters might think that a giant LED projector was used, rather than an incandescent lights and heat source. LEDs aren't good at projecting heat. They are degraded by heat, so they need very large heat sinks relative to their size. A very large array of LEDs would need a very large array of heat sinks. I don't believe that LEDs could emit such a vast amount of energy across the broad electromagnetic spectrum at all. Most LEDs only emit light in one single frequency. But broad spectrum LEDs, no, they don't exist. Not at that level anyway. If a projection wasn't bounced off the dome, and it wasn't, a reflector that could handle the incredible energy without being vaporized would also be required. That doesn't exist. Consider how large such a reflector would need to be in order to appear to be the size of the sun while being only 10 miles away. It would be a couple of 100 feet in diameter at least. I haven't worked the math out, but I'm pretty sure somebody could do it if they want to. In addition, suitable very large aircraft will be required to handle the huge reflector and move it around the perimeter of the observation area for the entire 24 hours. The level of precision required from the pilots would be incredible. And I wouldn't fancy being in the aircraft and possibly being hit by that beam of intense energy. Though I suppose an automatically flown drone, a very large drone, might be used. There aren't many, or even any, large aircraft, manned or otherwise, that have enough endurance to stay airborne for 24 hours. I'm rather certain that no aircraft that currently exists could handle the task. A balloon wouldn't work. It would have to be immense, and they are hard to keep on station, as well as moving around for 24 hours. And large amounts of heat are very bad for balloons. Speaking of the intensity of the light stroke heat beam, as it passed through the atmosphere to the reflector, it would heat the atmosphere, causing an effect known as thermal blooming. With an immensely powerful beam, there would be considerable local heating. With enough power over enough time, and bear in mind that the change in direction would only be at 15 degrees per hour for 24 hours. The atmospheric gas in the beam might become plasma. The visual effects would be dramatic. It might even be rather noisy. The beam projectors would certainly be very visible to everybody in the area. The idea is simply ludicrous. Oh, and the dome doesn't exist either. But that's by the by. The line from those two is off the scale. You may be aware there are cruise companies that offer cruises to Antarctica, and some even advertise that their customers can experience a 24-hour sun in the Antarctic summer. They've been doing it for years. Thousands of people have been on them, and thousands more will go in the future to experience their own final experiment. It's not that hard, folks.